Hey everyone, welcome back, and today we're going to be talking about a mini game that was released for the Legacy Console Edition called Glide. And in it, there were these Elytra speed rings or boost pads or whatever you want to call it. Now, those were a ton of fun back when I was playing on Console Edition, but you could never really bring them to survival, and now I can't even play Glide anymore. So I decided that I would use my knowledge of redstone and breach charges to bring them to the modern world of Minecraft. Now, if you've been watching for a while, you might be thinking, hey, isn't this a bit too useful of a redstone machine? And you might be a little bit right, but don't worry. This is just a sidetrack. I haven't been bought out by a big useful redstone quite yet. Just make sure to keep your eyes out for next video. Anyways, let's get back on track. So, how do we accomplish this? Well, of course the goal is to detect when a player flies through a certain area and detonate a set of breeze charges behind them. The detection is pretty simple because we can just place an array of tripwire hooks, but the actual explosion of the breeze charges, as well as creating them in the first place, is a little bit more complicated. Why don't we start with making the breeze charges? The idea of breeze charge capture, or getting a living breeze to shoot breeze charges and then collecting them, shows up quite a bit in a lot of my videos, and I basically just ripped the device off of my aerial faceplate, and that uses a tripwire hook to detect when the breeze throws a charge, and uses a piston to stop it in place. A fun quirk of powder snow is that it actually cancels all momentum of anything that's in it, and this actually works for projectiles like breeze charges, as long as they're being moved by a piston. And this is what enables us to essentially stop them in place and harvest them. What's interesting about this device, and actually the reason that it's so small up here, is because it has a corresponding base machine where the breeze charges are actually generated, and then they're used in a flying machine to be transported up to the device. When we actually ask for breeze charges, it triggers two of those breeze charge capturing devices in parallel, which generates a set amount of breeze charges and loads them onto this flying machine to carry them up. Now that we understand exactly how we get the breeze charges up to the device, let's talk a little bit about how we get them to explode. Breeze charges only explode when they're moving and they collide with something. Right now they're stationary, so we need to figure out a way to get them moving. In the faceplate design, I use a slime block being pushed by a piston to launch them. Here, I'm actually going to use flowing water, and that's going to actually be triggered by this sticky piston extending. Now, at first glance, this kind of setup with water on this side, water in the middle, water here, there's trapdoors, candles everywhere, it might make no sense, and it might not be immediately clear why pressing this button causes these breeze charges to all explode 2 game ticks later. That's because this whole setup relies on an utterly nonsensical mechanic called single source flow, and to better visualize that, I'm going to turn off shaders. What I've got here is 2 sources of water and a candle between them, and this water source is inexplicably flowing into this one, despite being a single source. This idea kind of goes a little bit against what we're traditionally believing how water works in Minecraft, because typically water only flows if there's somewhere else for it to flow into. However, by whatever the hell Mojang developers were smoking, if you place certain blocks, most notably blocks that don't obstruct cacti, between water and a source diagonally down and to the left of it, you can create these single source flowing anomalies. Now, the fastest way to interface with this single source flow is going to be extending and retracting a piston, which either obstructs or unobstructs the single source flow path and deactivates/reactivates the water source. For reasons I'm not going to get into, retracting the piston is a lot more slow and complex than extending it, because we can just hook up the piston directly to the tripwire. Now, that's not very helpful, because we're not interested in suddenly deactivating water. We need to suddenly generate flowing water in order to activate our breeze charges. However, this all changes when we bring a second piece of single source flow into the equation. This piece of water is actually single source flowing into both of these water sources, but since it's flowing in two directions at once, it actually cancels out. However, if we were to suddenly obstruct one side, then that causes an instant change into the other direction, which is exactly the mechanism that we're using right here in order to blow up these breeze charges. All that's left is positioning the breeze charges so they're really close to flowing directly into an obstruction. In this case, the breeze charges are right here, and when the water starts flowing away from the piston, they flow directly into this trapdoor. The last thing to know about this machine is that when you trigger it, it wirelessly communicates to the bottom half of the machine by just dispensing an item, which lands in a hopper. Okay, enough about the mechanics, let's talk about using it. Well, first question, how far can it go? Well, honestly, the answer is kind of infinitely far. It's really all about how many items you put inside of the dropper inside the counter circuit. Those counting circuits are actually on both sides, and they're located right here underneath, and the one we just used was set to 20. Going for a much more reasonable 3, you might expect a launch like this. Ultimately, the amount of launch that you get actually also seems to be very dependent on how well you receive momentum from the breeze charges, which seems to be at least somewhat correlated with how fast you're going, with faster speeds if I were to jump from this side, resulting in a little bit less added momentum. Now, some interesting things to note. This works really well in single player, because in single player, you're able to much more consistently guarantee that you're in the right spot when the explosion happens, guaranteeing the most momentum, and also you don't have to worry about other players having triggered the device before you, and thus the breeze charges not being there to boost you. Now, in its current state, it's actually really hard to tell if the device is loaded versus when it has been recently triggered, but maybe in the future I could make it so there's a buffer, so it reloads faster, and so it's a bit easier to tell in a multiplayer setting when it has just been triggered. Now, what's really useful about the way that it's designed, having the bulk of the machinery below ground with this minimalist setup on top, is that you're able to really easily build it into Elytra courses. If you're building a course in the sky, it's really easy to set it up in the sky, and similarly, if you don't have enough space for this kind of machinery, it's really easy to hide all of that. It also functions as a great optional objective in case you want to have it as like an optional speed boost, since there's lots of space to go around it and below it and stuff like that. Anyways, that'll be it. I'll provide a world download in the description. You can also find a link to the Discord server. If you want to see other interesting contraptions, make sure to subscribe to the channel, check out my other videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!